The 5 Love Languages, The Secret to Love That Lasts. Chapter 5, Love Language Number 2, Quality Time. I should have picked up on Andrea's primary love language from the beginning. What was she saying on that spring night when I visited her and Mark in Little Rock? Mark doesn't spend any time with me. What good are things if we don't ever enjoy them together? What was her desire? Quality time with Mark. She wanted his attention. She wanted him to focus on her, to give her time to do things with her. By quality time, I mean giving someone your undivided attention. I don't mean sitting on the couch watching television together. When you spend time that way, Netflix or HBO has your attention, not your spouse. What I mean is sitting on the couch with the TV off, looking at each other and talking. Devices put away, giving each other your undivided attention. That means talking, taking a walk, just the two of you, or going out to eat and looking at each other and talking. Time is a precious commodity, and we all have multiple demands on our time. Yet each of us have the exact same hours in a day. We can make the most of those hours by committing some of them to our spouse. If your mate's primary love language is quality time, she simply wants you, being with her, spending time. Provided it's the right kind of time. Have you ever noticed that in a restaurant you can almost always tell the difference between a dating couple and a married couple? A dating couple look at each other and talk. Married couples sit there and gaze around the restaurant. You think they were there to eat. When I sit with my wife and give her 20 minutes of my undivided attention and she does the same for me, we are giving each other 20 minutes of life. We will never have those 20 minutes again. We are giving our lives to each other. It is a powerful emotional communicator of love. One medicine cannot cure all diseases. In my advice to Andrea and Mark, I made a serious mistake. I assumed that words of affirmation would mean just as much to her as they would to him. And I had hoped that each of them would give adequate verbal affirmation. The emotional climate would change, and both of them would begin to feel loved. It worked for Mark. He began to feel more positive about Andrea, sensing her genuine appreciation for his hard work. But it did not work so well for Andrea, because words of affirmation was not her primary love language. Her language was quality time. I called Mark, who told me Andrea was still not happy. I think I know why, I said. The problem is that I suggested the wrong love language. Mark hadn't the foggiest idea what I meant, and I explained what makes one person feel loved emotionally is not always the thing that makes another person feel loved emotionally. He agreed that his language was words of affirmation, and he told me just how much it had meant to him as a boy and how good it felt when his wife expressed appreciation for the things he did. I explained that Andrea's language was not words of affirmation, but quality time. I explained the concept of giving someone your undivided attention, not talking to her while you watch sports or read text, but to looking at her into her eyes, giving her your full attention, doing something with her that she enjoys and doing it wholeheartedly. Like going to the symphony with her, he said. I could tell the lights were coming on in Little Rock. Dr. Chapman, that's what she's always complained about. I didn't do things with her. I didn't spend any time with her. She's always said we used to go places and do things before we were married, but now you're too busy. And that's her love language, all right, no question about it. But what am I going to do? My job is so demanding. Tell me about it, I said. For the next 10 minutes, he gave me the history of the climb of up the organizational ladder, of how hard he had worked and how proud he was of his accomplishments. He told me of his dreams for the future and that he knew within the next 5 years he would be where he wanted to be. Do you want to be there alone, or do you want to be there with Andrea and the children? I asked. I want her to be with me, Dr. Chapman. I want her to enjoy it with me. That's why it always hurts so much when she criticizes me for spending time on the job. I'm doing this for us. I wanted her to be part of it, but she's always so negative. Are you beginning to see why she was so negative, Mark? I asked. Her love language is quality time, and you have given her so little of that time that her love tank is empty. She doesn't feel secure in your love. Therefore, she has lashed out at what was taking your time in her mind, your job. She doesn't really hate your job. She hates the fact that she feels so little love coming from you. There's only one answer, Mark, and it is costly. You have to make time for Andrea. You have to love her in the right love language. I know you are right, Dr. Chapman. Where do I begin? I asked Mark if he had his legal pad handy, the same pad on which he wrote the list of positive things about Andrea. It's right here. Good, we're going to make another list. What are some things that you and Andrea would like to do with her? What were some of the things that you know Andrea would like you to do with her? Things she has mentioned through the years. Here's Mark's list. Spend a weekend in the mountains, sometime with the kids and sometimes just the two of us. Meet her for lunch at a nice restaurant or sometimes just at a Panera. When I come home at night, sit down and talk with her about my day and listen as she tells me about her day. She doesn't want me to watch TV while we're trying to talk. Spend time talking with the children about their school experiences. Spend time playing games with the children. Go on a picnic with her and the kids on Saturday and don't complain about the ants and flies. Take a vacation with the family at least once a year. Go walking with her and talk as we walk. When Mark's list was finished, I said, "You know what I'm going to suggest, don't you, Mark?" "Do them," he said. "That's right, for one a week for the next 2 months. Where will you find the time? You will make it. You are a wise man," I continued. "You would not be where you are now if you were not a good decision maker. You have the ability to plan your life and to include Andrea in your plans." "I know," he said. "I can do it." And Mark, this does not have to diminish your vocational goals. It just means that whenever you get to the top, Andrea and the children will be with you. "That is what I want more than anything," Mark said with a feeling. The years have come and gone. Andrea and Mark have ups and downs, but the most important thing is that they have done it all together. The children have left the nest, and Mark and Andrea have agreed that these are the best years ever. Mark has become an avid symphony fan, and Andrea has made an unending list on our legal pad of things she appreciates about Mark. He never tires of hearing them. Focused attention. This isn't enough just to be in the same room with someone. A key ingredient to giving your spouse quality time is giving them focused attention, especially in the era of many distractions. When a father is sitting on the floor rolling a ball to his 2-year-old, his attention is not focused on the ball, but on the child. For that brief moment, however long it lasts, they are together. If, however, the father is talking on the phone while he rolls the ball, his attention is diluted. Some husbands and wives think that they are spending time together when in reality they are only living in close proximity. They are in the same house in the same time, but they are not together. A wife who is texting while her husband tries to talk to her is not giving him quality time because he does not have her full attention. Quality time does not mean that we have to spend our moments gazing into each other's eyes. It means that we are doing something together and that we are giving our full attention to the other person. The activity in which we are both engaged is incidental. The important thing emotionally is that we are spending focused time with each other. The activity is a vehicle that creates a sense of togetherness. The more important thing about the father rolling the ball to the 2-year-old is not the activity itself, but the emotions that are created between the father and his child. Similarly, a husband and wife going running together, if it is genuinely quality time, will focus not on the run, but on the fact that they are spending time together. What happens on the emotional level is what matters. Our spending time together in a common pursuit communicates that we care about each other, that we enjoy being with each other, and that we like doing things together. Quality conversation. Like words of affirmation, the language of quality time also has many dialects. One of the most common dialects is that of quality conversation. By quality conversation, I mean sympathetic dialogue where two individuals are sharing their experiences, thoughts, feelings, and desires in a friendly, uninterrupted context. Most individuals who complain that their spouse does not talk does not mean literally that he or she never says a word. They mean that he or she seldom takes part in sympathetic dialogue. If your spouse's primary love language is quality time, such dialogue is crucial to his or her emotional sense of being loved. Quality conversation is quite different from her first love language. Words of affirmation focus on what we are saying, whereas quality conversation focuses on what we are hearing. If I'm sharing my love for you by means of quality time and we are going to spend that time in conversation, it means I will focus on drawing you out, listening sympathetically to do what you have to say. I will ask questions not in a badgering manner, but in a genuine desire to understand your thoughts, feelings, and desires. I met Patrick when he was 43 and had been married for 17 years. I remember because his first words were so dramatic. He sat in the leather chair in my office, and after briefly introducing himself, he leaned forward and said with great emotion, "Dr. Chapman, I've been a fool, a real fool." "What has led you to that conclusion?" I asked. "I've been married for 17 years," he said, "and my wife has left me, and now I realize what a fool I've been." I repeated my original question. "In what way have you been a fool?" My wife would come home from work and tell me about her problems in her office. I would listen to her and tell her what I thought she should do. I would always give her advice. I told her that she had to confront the problem. Problems don't go away. You have to talk with people involved with or your supervisor. You have to deal with problems. The next day, she would come home from work and tell me about the same problems. I would ask her if she did and what I had suggested the day before. She would shake her head and say no. After 3 or 4 nights of that, I would get angry and would tell her not to expect any sympathy from me if she wasn't willing to take the advice I was giving her. She didn't have to live under that kind of stress and pressure. She could solve her problem if she would simply do what I told her. It hurts me to see her living under such stress because I knew she didn't have to. The next time she'd bring up the problem, I would say, "I don't want to hear about it. I've told you what you need to do. If you're not going to listen to my advice, I don't want to hear it." I would withdraw and go about my business. "What a fool I was," he said. "What a fool." Now I realized that she didn't want advice, and she told me about her struggles at work. She wanted sympathy. She wanted me to listen, to give her attention, to let her know that I could understand the hurt, the stress, the pressure. She wanted to know that I loved her and that I was with her. She didn't want advice, she just wanted to know that I understood. But I never tried to understand. I was too busy giving advice, and now she's gone. Patrick's wife had been pleading for quality conversations emotionally. She longed for him to focus attention on her by listening to her pain and frustration. Patrick was not focusing on listening, but on speaking. He listened only long enough to hear the problem and formulate a solution. He didn't listen long enough or well enough to hear her cry for support and understanding. Many of us are like Patrick. We are trained to analyze problems and create solutions. We forget that marriage is a relationship and not a project to be completed or a problem to solve. A relationship calls for sympathetic listening with a view to understanding each other's person's thoughts, feelings, and desires. We must be willing to give advice, but only when it is requested and never in a condescending manner. Most of us have little training in listening, and we are far more efficient in thinking and speaking. Learning to listen may be as difficult as learning a foreign language, but learn we must. If we want to communicate love, that is especially true if your spouse's primary love language is quality time, and his or her dialect is quality conversation. Fortunately, numerous books on the articles have been written on developing the art of listening. I will not seek to repeat what is written elsewhere, but suggest the following summary of practical tips. 1. Maintain eye contact when your spouse is talking. That keeps your mind from wandering in communications that he or she has your full attention. 2. Don't listen to your spouse and do something else at the same time. Remember, quality time is giving someone your undivided attention. If you are doing something you cannot turn from immediately, tell your spouse the truth. A positive approach might be, "I know you're trying to talk to me, and I'm interested, but I want to give you my full attention, and I can't do that right now. But if you give me 10 minutes to finish this, I'll sit down and listen to you." Most spouses will respect such a request. 3. Listen for feelings. Ask yourself, what emotion is my spouse experiencing? When you think you have the answer, confirm it. For example, "It sounds to me like you are feeling disappointed because I forgot blank." That gives him a chance to clarify his feelings. It also communicates that you are listening intently to what he is saying. 4. Observe body language. Clenched fists, trembling hands, tears, furrowed brows, and eye movements may give you clues as to what the other is feeling. Sometimes body language speaks a message while words speak another. Ask for clarification to make sure that you know what she is really thinking and feeling. 5. Refuse to interrupt. Research has indicated that the average individual listens for only 17 seconds before interrupting and interjecting with his own ideas. If I give you my undivided attention while you are talking, I will refrain from defending myself or hurling accusations at you or dogmatically stating my position. My goal is to discover your thoughts and feelings. My objective is not to defend myself or to set you straight. It is to understand you. Learning to talk. Quality conversation requires not only a sympathetic listening, but also self-revelation. When a wife says, "I wish my husband would talk, I never know what he is thinking or feeling," she is pleading for intimacy. She wants to feel close to her husband, but how can she feel close to someone whom she doesn't know? In order for her to feel loved, he must learn to reveal himself. If her primary love language is quality time, and her dialect is quality conversation, her emotional love tank will never be filled until he tells her his thoughts and feelings. Self-revelation does not come easy for some of us. We may have grown up in homes where the expression of thoughts and feelings was not encouraged but squelched. To request a toy was to receive a lecture on how the sad state of family finances. The child went away feeling guilty for having the desire and quickly learned not to express his desires. When he expressed anger, his parents responded with harsh and condemning words. Thus that child learned that expressing angry feelings is not appropriate. If the child was made to feel guilty for expressing disappointment, not at being able to go to the store with his father, he learned to hold his disappointment inside. By the time we reach adulthood, many of us have learned to deny our feelings. We are no longer in touch with our emotional selves. A wife says to her husband, "How do you feel about what Steve did?" And the husband responds, "I think he was wrong, he should have." But instead of telling her his feelings, he is voicing his thoughts. Perhaps he has a reason to feel angry or disappointed, but he has lived so long in the world of thought that he does not acknowledge his feelings. When he decides to learn the language of quality conversation, it will be like learning a foreign language. The place to begin is by getting in touch with his feelings, becoming aware that he is an emotional creature in spite of the fact that he has denied that part of his life. If you need to learn the language of quality conversation, begin by noting the emotions you feel away from home. Carry a small notepad and keep it with you daily. 3 times each day, ask yourself, what emotions have I felt in the last 3 hours? What did I feel on the way to work when the driver behind me was riding my bumper? What did I feel when I stopped at the gas station and the automatic pump did not shut off and the side of the car was covered in gas? What did I feel when I got to the office and found that the project I was working on had to be completed in 3 days when I thought I had another 2 weeks? Write down your feelings in the notepad and a word or two to help you remember an event corresponding to the feeling. Your list may look like this. Event, tailgater. Feelings, angry. Event, gas station. Feelings, very upset. Event, work project due. Feelings, frustrated and anxious. Do that exercise 3 times a day and you will develop an awareness of your emotional nature. Using your notepad, communicate your emotions and events briefly with your spouse as many days as possible. In a few weeks, you will become comfortable expressing your emotions with him or her, and eventually you will feel comfortable discussing your emotions towards your spouse, the children, and events that occur within the home. Remember, emotions themselves are neither good nor bad. They are simply our psychological responses to the events of life. Based on our thoughts and emotions, we eventually make decisions. When the tailgater was following you on the highway, you felt angry. Perhaps you had these thoughts: I wish he would lay off. I wish he would pass me. If I thought I wouldn't get caught, I'd press the accelerator and leave him in the twilight. I should slam on my brakes and let the insurance company buy me a new car. Maybe I'll pull off the road and let him pass. Eventually, you made some decisions when the other driver backed off, turned, or passed you, and you arrived safely at work. In each of life's events, we have emotions, thoughts, desires, and eventually actions. The expression of that process is called self-revelation. If you choose to learn the love dialect of quality conversation, that is, the learning road you must follow. Dead Seas and Babbling Brooks. Not all of us are out of touch with our emotions, but when it comes to talking, all of us are affected by our personality. I have observed 2 basic personality types. The first I call Dead Sea. In the little nation of Israel, the Sea of Galilee flows through by the way of the Jordan River into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea goes nowhere, and it receives, but it does not give. This personality type receives many experiences, emotions, and thoughts throughout the day. We have a large reservoir where we store that information and are perfectly happy not to talk. If you say to a Dead Sea personality, "What's wrong? Why aren't you talking tonight?" he'll probably answer, "Nothing's wrong. What makes you think something's wrong?" And that response is perfectly honest. He is content not to talk. He could drive from Chicago to Detroit and never say a word and be perfectly happy. On the other extreme is the Babbling Brook. For this personality, whatever enters the eye gate or the ear gate comes out of the mouth gate, and there are seldom 60 seconds between the two. Whatever they see, whatever they hear, they tell. In fact, if no one is at home to talk to, they will call someone else. Do you know what I saw? Do you know what I heard? If they can't get someone on the phone, they may talk to themselves because they have no reservoir. Many times a Dead Sea marries a babbling brook. That happens because when they are dating, it is a very attractive match. If you are a Dead Sea and you date a babbling brook, you will have a wonderful evening. You don't have to think, how will I get the conversation started tonight? How will I keep the conversation flowing? In fact, you don't have to think at all. All you have to do is nod your head and say, uh-huh, and she will fill up the whole evening with you, or will go home saying, what a wonderful person. On the other hand, if you're a babbling brook and you date a Dead Sea, you will have an equally wonderful evening because the Dead Sea are the world's best listeners. If you babble for 3 hours, he will listen intently to you. You will go home saying, what a wonderful person. You attract each other. But 5 years marriage, the babbling brook wakes up one morning and says, we've been married for 5 years and I don't know him. The Dead Sea is saying, I know her too well. I wish she would stop the flow and give me a break. The good news is that the Dead Sea can learn to talk and the babbling brooks can learn to listen. We are influenced by our personality, but not controlled by it. One way to learn new patterns is to establish a daily sharing time in which each of you will talk about 3 things that happened to you in that day. How you feel about them. I call that the minimum daily requirement for a healthy marriage. If you start with the daily minimum, in a few weeks or months, you may find quality conversation flowing more freely between you. Quality activities. In addition to the basic love language of quality time, or giving your spouse your undivided attention, is another dialect called quality activities. At a recent marriage seminar, I asked couples to complete the following sentence. I feel most loved when my husband and wife is when blank. Here's the response of a 29-year-old husband who has been married for 8 years. I feel most loved by my wife when we do things together, things I like to do and things she likes to do. We talk more, it sort of feels like we're dating again. That is a typical response of individuals whose primary love language is quality time. The emphasis on being together, doing things together, giving each other's undivided attention. Quality activities may include anything in which one or both of you have an interest. The emphasis is not on what you are doing, but why you are doing it. The purpose is to experience something together, to walk away from it feeling like he cares about me, he was willing to do something with me that I enjoy, and he did it with a positive attitude. That is love, and for some people it's love's loudest voice. One of Emily's favorite pastimes is browsing in the used bookstores. I love to just disappear into the stacks and see what treasures I can find, she says. Husband Jeff, less than an avid reader, has learned to share these experiences with Emily and even point out books she may enjoy. Emily, for her part, has learned to compromise and not to force Jeff into spending hours in the stacks. As a result, Jeff proudly says, I vowed early on that if there was a book Emily wanted, I would buy it for her. Jeff may have never become a bookworm, but he has become proficient at loving Emily. Quality activities may include putting in a garden, visiting historic sites, birding, going to a concert, working out together, or having another couple over the homemade soup and bread. The activity is limited only by your interest and willingness to try new experiences. The essential ingredients to quality activity are 1. At least one of you wants to do it. 2. The other is willing to do it. 3. Both of you know why you're doing it, to express love by being together. One of the byproducts of quality activities is that they provide a memory bank and from which to draw from in the years ahead. Fortunate is the couple who remembers a foggy early morning stroll along the coast, the spring when they put in a prairie garden, and the day they revisited their childhood neighborhood, the night they attended their first Major League Baseball game together, the one and only time they went skiing together and he broke his leg, the quiet times of working side by side in the night in the home office, and oh yes, the awe of standing beneath the waterfall after the 2-mile hike. They can almost feel the mist as they remember. Those are memories of love, especially for the person whose primary love language is quality time. And where do we find time for such activities, especially if both of us have vocations outside the home? We make time, just as we make time for lunch and dinner. Why? Because it is essential to our marriage as meals are to our health. It is difficult. Does it take careful planning? Yes, it does. We have to give up on some individual activities. Perhaps it does mean that we do some things we don't particularly enjoy. Certainly, see Jeff and Emily. Is it worth it? Without a doubt. What is in it for me? The pleasure of living with a spouse who feels loved and knowing that I have learned to speak his or her love language fluently. A personal word of thanks to Mark and Andrea in Little Rock, who taught me the value of love language number 1, words of affirmation, and love language number 2, quality time. Now it's on to Chicago and love language number 3. Your turn. What in your marriage detracts you from spending quality time? If your spouse's love language is quality time, 1. Some couples are together a lot more than others, and if that's the case for you, don't try to make all your time together quality time. Designate specific times and places for quality togetherness. 2. Ask your spouse for a list of 5 activities that he would enjoy doing with you. Don't assume you know. Make plans to do one of them each month for the next 5 months. If money is an issue, space and freebies between, but we can afford this events. 3. One way to share quality time at a distance is to include your spouse in your day as it's happening. Send a photo of something you saw on the walk to the office, or relay a funny incident that happened in a meeting. One woman said, "My husband sent me photos of him, my daughter, and the dog sitting on our front porch. I was at work and it made me feel like I was hanging out with them." 4. Think of an activity your spouse enjoys, but which brings little pleasure to you. Like football, crafting, nature photography. Tell your spouse that you are trying to broaden your horizons and would like to join them in this activity sometime this month. Set a date and give it your best effort. 5. Plan a weekend getaway just for the two of you sometime within the next 6 months. Be sure it is a weekend when you won't have to be in touch with the office or have a family commitment. Focus on relaxing together, doing what one or both of you enjoy. 6. Make time every day to share with each other some of the events of the day. When you spend more time watching the news than you do listening to each other, you end up more concerned about the Middle East than about your spouse. Or when you spend more time on Facebook than you do listening to each other, you end up more concerned about your 100 friends than about your spouse. 7. If you have to do chores anyway, talk as you dust, declutter, and do laundry. It will make the work go much faster. 8. Read the travel section in the Sunday paper together and dream out loud about the places you'd like to go. Whether you actually go to these places or not, it's fun to imagine together.